This section is all about strings in Python, so let's get a brief overview of strings. We have seen them already in this course. A string is a finite series of characters. These characters can be letters, numbers, symbols, or spaces. A string is also immutable. This means it cannot be altered in place. Once defined, the string variable needs to be overwritten in order to alter it. A string is also considered an iterable. This means that you can cycle through each character in the string one at a time. And we're going to take a look at that later on in the course. For now, let's head over to PyScripter and take a look at creating some strings. I'm going to open up a pre-made Python script. I'm going to open a file. I'm going to navigate to PyBasics, Python script, reference and strings, and I'm going to open up the strings.py script. For this lesson, I'm going to walk through the code because there really is nothing new here that you haven't seen before. So we know we can use single, double or triple quotes to define a string and assign it to a variable. Here we are using double quotes and assigning the text Dublin to the variable city. We're then going to print the city variable to the screen. Often with GIS data you will need to filter using SQL type expressions, so I recommend you get used to using double quotes. As you can see here, we create an SQL expression where county equals Dublin, and because Dublin is text, it is wrapped in single quotes in SQL. This allows us to wrap the whole SQL expression in double quotes. Let's run the script. And we can see we were printed Dublin and Dublin again because I didn't put in SQL expression here. Let me just update that and I'll rerun. So you can see we got Dublin and county equals Dublin with our single quotes. Now what happens if I try to wrap this SQL expression in single quotes and run? We can see there's already a syntax error, and we are getting a syntax error when we try and run the code. This is because it is thinking that this is the start of our string and this is the end of our string, and then that Dublin is a variable followed by two single quotes. This is why we need to wrap this in double quotes. Now there is a way to use single quotes and use single quotes inside the string, and we'll look at that in the escape characters lesson. For now, let's move on. I can highlight all this and click the toggle comment to comment out. Scroll down and we're going to talk about an empty string. I highly recommend that you write out the code from this lesson and run for yourself. I'm only performing a walkthrough because we've seen most of this already. It's important to note the difference between none and an empty string. Here we are setting an empty string to equal empty. Now there is no space in between those double quotes, they're just two double quotes. We'll assign that to a variable called empty, and we have our none keyword and we'll assign that to a variable called none. Now this is acceptable because it is not an uppercase N. Python is case sensitive. We'll then print none and print empty to screen. I'll clear this over here and we're going to run the script. And we can see it printed none, and it also printed an empty string here on this line below none. So you can see the difference between none and an empty string. We'll comment out our empty string example and we'll take a look at a multi-line string. Now we've seen multi-line strings before as comments. Truthfully, there is no multi-line comment in Python, unlike you have the single line comment with the hashtag. Python just ignores any string that is not associated with a variable. So here we're going to use triple single quotes and a multi-line string, and we will also use triple double quotes and a multi-line string. So I'm going to comment out the second one for now, and we'll run the first. So we're assigning our sentence to a variable called description and printing the screen, and we can see that printed over in our Python interpreter. I'll comment out our triple single quotes and open up our triple double quotes and run and see we get the same output. I'll clear the Python interpreter. Comment out our description example with the multi-line string. I'll open up our last example here. We're going to take a look at the built-in string function that creates a string object. Here we are creating a string for Dublin. I'm going to assign that to a variable called city. We then have a float that we saw in the previous section, and we're going to cast that to a string. In other words, convert our decimal value to a string, and we'll assign that to a variable called longitude. And we'll do the same for an integer, cast it to a string and apply that to a variable called latitude. We'll then print city to screen. We're going to print the type of the longitude and the type of the latitude to screen. So we'll run our code, and we can see we got Dublin, and our longitude and latitude were cast to a string object. In this video, we got an overall feel for what a string object is in Python. A string is enclosed in single, double, or triple quotation marks. And we know that a string is a finite sequence of characters of 0 or more characters. And these characters can be letters, numbers, symbols, and spaces. And it can also be an empty string. We heard at the start that a string is immutable, and we'll take a look at that in a couple of lessons' time. And it was also noted that a string is iterable, and we'll be looking at iterating over our data in a future section of this course.